Welcome to Life Stories. In today's story, we follow Emily Foster, a woman who seemingly had it all: wealth, love, and a perfect marriage. But when secrets, betrayal, and infidelity tear her world apart, Emily must summon unimaginable strength to protect her unborn child and reclaim her life. This is a tale of heartbreak, courage, and the power to overcome. Join us as we dive into this emotional journey of resilience and the pursuit of a new beginning. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to begin today's story with Life Stories. Thomas Griffin had it all: wealth, power, and prestige. He was the embodiment of the American dream, the kind of man people aspired to be. With a sharp mind and relentless ambition, Thomas had built Griffin Enterprises from the ground up, transforming it into a conglomerate that spanned multiple industries: tech startups, luxury hotels, and global philanthropic initiatives. His name was synonymous with success, and his public image seemed flawless. Every morning, Thomas would be chauffeured to his sleek office in the heart of Manhattan, his presence commanding the respect of everyone around him. He had the kind of charisma that made people listen when he spoke, and his handsome, movie star-like smile could melt even the coldest of hearts. He wasn't just a businessman, he was a man who seemed to have it all: success, wealth, and a beautiful family. His wife, Emily Foster, was the picture of elegance. The daughter of a well-known real estate mogul, she had grown up in privilege, attending the best schools and rubbing shoulders with high society. But Emily wasn't just admired for her looks or her family connections. She had a warmth to her that drew people in, a quiet grace that seemed to illuminate any room she entered. She was a philanthropist, tirelessly working for causes that resonated deeply with her: a women's shelter, children's hospitals, environmental advocacy. People adored her, and she loved her life. She loved Thomas. She loved their shared dream of a future filled with happiness and success. And she was excited, incredibly excited, to be expecting their first child. The announcement of her pregnancy had been the talk of the town. The tabloids were abuzz with pictures of Emily cradling her baby bump, the couple attending charity galas and extravagant events. Every detail of their life was scrutinized by the media, but no one seemed to question the perfection of it all. For months, Emily and Thomas had been the golden couple, their marriage the epitome of what everyone believed a fairy tale should look like. But as the weeks wore on, Emily began to feel a subtle shift in Thomas. It started with small things: the missed dinners, the last-minute business trips to London that never seemed to match the official calendar. She convinced herself it was just the pressure of running an empire, the natural consequence of the life they led. After all, her own father had been consumed by his work, and Emily understood the sacrifices that came with building a legacy. Yet, there was an undercurrent of unease in her heart, a whispering feeling that something was changing, something that she couldn't put her finger on. Thomas was increasingly distant. He no longer accompanied her to routine doctor appointments, sending a personal assistant instead. At first, she told herself that it was just his busy schedule, that he had work to do. But as the days passed, the cracks in their perfect life became harder to ignore. His temper seemed to flare more easily, his gaze distant when they spoke, and there was a coldness in his words that had never been there before. Emily tried to brush it off, telling herself that it was the pressure of running the company and the excitement of their growing family that was weighing on him. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Meanwhile, Thomas seemed completely unaware of the unease his behavior was causing. He was consumed by his own world, a world where work and success were all-consuming. His company was flourishing, and he was more confident than ever in his ability to control everything around him. The media adored him, his colleagues respected him, and his wife, well, she seemed to be the perfect accessory to his carefully curated image. He knew how to keep up appearances, how to make everything look flawless. But beneath the polished surface of his life, something was brewing. Whispers began to circulate among Thomas's employees. A mysterious woman had been spotted leaving his office late at night. A woman who was not his wife. She was often seen dressed in designer clothes, stepping into sleek black cars that didn't belong to Thomas's wife. There were rumors, but no one dared speak out. After all, Thomas Griffin was not a man to be crossed. The stories went untold, buried under the weight of fear and reverence. Emily, for her part, remained blissfully unaware of these whispers. She continued with her philanthropic work, focusing on the causes that had always been close to her heart. She was dedicated to her pregnancy, her love for Thomas unwavering. But all around her, the signs were there. The distance between them was growing, the tension palpable in every room they shared. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to confront the growing unease she felt. Instead, she buried herself in her work, convinced that everything would settle down. But deep down, she knew something was wrong, and she couldn't ignore it forever. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's suspicions grew. She could no longer deny the growing distance between herself and Thomas. What had once been a loving and supportive marriage now felt like a cold partnership between two strangers. Thomas, once so present in her life, seemed lost in his own world, a world she no longer had access to. He was always on business trips, or so he claimed, and when he was home, he was distant, often retreating to his study the moment he walked through the door. Emily tried to reach out, tried to bridge the gap that had formed between them, but her efforts were met with indifference. She had always believed in their love, in the dreams they had shared. But now, she felt like an outsider in her own marriage. Still, she couldn't bring herself to confront him. She told herself that she was just being paranoid, that the stress of pregnancy and the demands of their life had simply taken their toll on Thomas. But with each passing day, the knot in her stomach grew tighter. Then, one evening, everything changed. Emily's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I have information about your husband. We should talk." The message sent a chill down her spine, and her mind raced. Who could this be? Could it be someone from work? A friend of Thomas's? Or was it something more serious? Her heart hammered in her chest as she typed out a hesitant reply. "What do you know about my husband?" The response came quickly. "Meet me tomorrow. I'll explain everything." The following day, Emily met the person behind the text, a young man named Anthony Rosario. A bellhop at a hotel where Thomas had been staying. Emily had no idea who he was, but the urgency in his eyes told her that this wasn't a joke. They sat down in a quiet corner of a cafe, away from prying eyes, and Anthony began to speak. "I've seen your husband," Anthony began, his voice low and filled with hesitation. "He's been visiting a hotel in Midtown. Not for business, but for personal reasons." Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. Could this be true? Thomas, visiting a hotel for personal reasons? "I'm certain it was him," Anthony continued, pulling out his phone. "I recognized him from a charity gala last year. He was with another woman. Not you." He handed Emily his phone, showing her a blurry but unmistakable picture of Thomas stepping out of an elevator with a woman, an elegant woman with striking features. "Her name is Rachel Green. I don't know who she is. But your husband has been seeing her." Emily felt as if the world had just fallen away from her. She stared at the picture, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. It was impossible. Thomas, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted, was cheating on her. Not only was he betraying her trust, but he had been doing so in the most public of ways. Right under her nose. Tears stung Emily's eyes, but she fought them back. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice shaking. Anthony looked down at his coffee, then back up at her. "I couldn't keep quiet. My mother works at the hotel. She's seen things, heard things. She's a fan of yours. You know, she volunteers at the same women's shelter you fund. I felt like you should know the truth." Emily's heart ached for Anthony. The guilt in his eyes was palpable. But she knew this wasn't about him. It was about Thomas, the man who had promised her forever. The betrayal was unbearable. Still, Emily maintained her composure, her thoughts racing. She thanked Anthony for his courage in telling her the truth and handed him an envelope of money for his troubles. As Emily left the cafe, her mind was in a whirl. She had always known something was off, but she had never imagined that it would be something like this. She had always believed in their love, in the life they had built together. Now, she was forced to face the ugly truth. Thomas had been living a double life. One that he had kept hidden from her for far too long. But the discovery of his infidelity was just the beginning. Emily knew that she needed to confront him. But she also knew that this was only the first step in what would be a long and painful journey. The road ahead would be filled with difficult decisions, legal battles, and heartache. But one thing was certain, she would no longer allow herself to be deceived. She was stronger than she had ever realized. And she would fight for herself and her unborn child, no matter the cost. The days that followed Anthony's revelation were a blur of emotions, anger, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Emily couldn't shake the image of Thomas with Rachel Green, the woman who had slowly torn their marriage apart. She kept replaying the conversation with Anthony in her mind, the weight of the truth crashing down on her. The perfect life she had believed in was an illusion, shattered by the most brutal of betrayals. But Emily wasn't the type to wallow in despair. She had always been a fighter. And now, more than ever, she knew she had to take control of her life. She couldn't let Thomas's deceit destroy everything she had worked so hard for. She had a child to protect. And that child needed her to be strong. With a sense of resolve, Emily began to put her plan into motion. The first step was to confront Thomas. But she knew it wasn't going to be easy. She had seen how he had begun to distance himself from her. How cold and defensive he had become. He had always prided himself on being in control. And now, she had to take that control back. The charity gala that was coming up felt like the perfect opportunity. It was an event that Thomas had promised he would attend. But she knew he might pull another disappearing act. Despite their growing tensions, Emily had continued to pour herself into her philanthropic work. She had been the one to organize the event, the one to invite the donors and dignitaries. It was important, but for Emily, it had become more than just another event. It was a place where she could confront the man who had betrayed her. The night of the gala arrived, and Emily stood at the front of the ballroom, greeting the guests with a poise and grace that masked the storm raging inside her. The room was filled with New York's elite, politicians, celebrities, and businessmen, all gathered to support her charity. But despite the glamour, the tension was palpable. Emily was trying desperately to keep her composure, to maintain the image of the perfect wife. But inside, she was struggling to hold it all together. She spotted Thomas as soon as he walked in. He was late, as usual, but his confidence was as unwavering as ever. He flashed his trademark smile, shook hands with a few guests, and then made his way toward her. Emily could feel the coolness in the air between them as he approached. The casualness of his demeanor made her blood boil, but she kept her smile in place. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, his voice smooth but distant. "I had a last-minute meeting to wrap up." Emily nodded, forcing herself to stay calm. "It's fine. You made it," she replied, though every word felt like a lie. As the evening wore on, Emily couldn't help but notice how close Thomas and Rachel were. They exchanged glances, whispered in each other's ears, and laughed a little too loudly for Emily's liking. The whispers of the guests around them only made things worse. Emily could feel the anger bubbling up inside her. But she couldn't show it, not in public. The night took a dark turn during the main event. Emily took to the stage to give her speech about the importance of supporting women's shelters and children's hospitals. She had poured her heart into the speech. But as she stood in front of the crowd, her eyes found Thomas and Rachel, who were standing near the bar, speaking in hushed tones. The sight of them together, so intimate, so carefree, was like a dagger to her chest. As she spoke, every word seemed to carry a weight of sadness and betrayal. She couldn't help but think about the life she had imagined for herself, for their child, and now, all of it was slipping through her fingers. After the speech, Emily made her way backstage to collect herself. But as she walked past Thomas and Rachel, Something happened. Rachel, perhaps unknowingly, elbowed her belly as she brushed past. A slight but deliberate gesture that made Emily gasp in pain. The crowd fell silent as Emily staggered back, clutching her stomach. Thomas rushed over, but instead of showing concern, he snapped at her. "Watch where you're going," he barked, his tone sharp and cold. The humiliation was overwhelming. Emily stood there, her hand pressed against her belly, her face flushed with anger and hurt. She had expected something from Thomas. But not this. Not in front of all these people. She wanted to scream, to make him feel the weight of what he had done. But all she could do was stand there, trembling with fury. Her father, Richard, appeared in the crowd, rushing toward them. He pushed past Thomas and placed himself between Emily and the man who had broken her heart. "Have you lost your mind?" he shouted at Thomas, his voice filled with disbelief and anger. In that moment, Emily knew that things would never be the same. The man she had once loved, the man who had promised to be her rock, had turned into someone unrecognizable. And now, the world would know the truth. Their perfect image had been shattered, and there was no going back. The room buzzed with whispers, the cameras flashing, and Emily's heart pounded in her chest. But as she stood there, facing her father's protective embrace, a sense of clarity washed over her. She would no longer be a passive participant in her own life. She was taking control, and nothing, no betrayal, no humiliation, would stop her from doing what was right for her and her child. For the first time in months, Emily felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. In the days following the charity gala, Emily's life seemed to shift dramatically. The slap, the public confrontation, the broken image, it was all over the news. Thomas Griffin's world, which had seemed so unshakable just days before, was beginning to crumble. The media had caught wind of the scandal, and there was no way to escape it now. Pictures of Thomas slapping Emily, of him in the company of his mistress, Rachel Green, flooded the tabloids. The world was watching, and nothing could erase the stain of betrayal that now marked his name. But Emily wasn't focused on the media frenzy. She had bigger things to deal with. Her primary concern was the future of her child and the life she had built for them both. She had made a decision. It was time to fight back. Thomas had crossed a line, and it was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. Emily's father, Richard, had been a rock throughout this storm. He had immediately stepped in to protect her, offering support in every way possible. He had made calls to his legal contacts and arranged for the best attorney to handle their case. Margaret Cho, a formidable lawyer known for her no-nonsense approach, was now on their side. Emily knew that with Margaret's help, they would be able to take the necessary steps to secure her future, and the future of her unborn child. Meanwhile, Thomas was trying to salvage whatever he could. The shock of the public scandal had rocked him to his core. His phone rang constantly with calls from the media, his board members, and his business associates. The empire he had worked so hard to build was crumbling. And still, he hadn't fully grasped the consequences of what he had done. One morning, 2 days after the scandal had erupted, Emily sat in her father's penthouse, reviewing legal documents with Margaret. They were preparing to file for divorce, to secure a protective order, and to ensure that Thomas couldn't come near her or the baby without facing serious legal repercussions. But as she scanned through the papers, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Thomas. "I need to see you." His message read, "Please, just let me explain." Emily's hands trembled slightly as she read the words. She had expected this. Of course, Thomas wasn't the type to go down without a fight. He believed he could talk his way out of anything, that he could convince her to take him back. But Emily wasn't the same woman she had been before. She wasn't going to let him manipulate her again. She replied, coldly, "It's too late for explanations. We're done." But Thomas wasn't ready to let go. He reached out again, this time calling her directly. His voice, when it came through the phone, was full of desperation. "Emily, I never wanted this to happen," he said. "I was blinded by everything. But you have to understand. It wasn't what you think. I never meant to hurt you. Emily's heart clenched at the sound of his voice. But she didn't let herself waver. She had heard enough lies. The pain, the betrayal, it was too much. I don't need your explanations, Thomas, she replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. You've shown me who you really are. And I won't let you hurt me, or our child, any longer. Silence hung between them, and then, finally, Emily said, I'm filing for divorce. I'm getting full custody, and I will make sure you never hurt anyone again. With that, she hung up. The decision was final. Emily felt a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. In that moment, as she stood in her father's penthouse, surrounded by the comfort of family and the promise of a new beginning, Emily understood something profound. She had spent so long trying to protect the dream of the perfect life, the perfect marriage, but the real strength came not from keeping up appearances, but from embracing the truth, no matter how painful it was. She was no longer defined by the man she had married. She was her own woman, a mother-to-be, a survivor. That afternoon, Margaret Cho arrived at the penthouse with a set of documents in hand. She had already arranged the legal proceedings. The divorce papers would be filed that very day, and the protective order was being prepared. They had the evidence they needed, and with the help of Anthony Rosario, who had provided crucial information about Thomas's financial misconduct, they were ready to proceed. But there was one more thing Emily needed to do. As she stood by the window, looking out over the city that had once felt like their empire, Emily made a silent vow. She would no longer allow herself to be a victim of Thomas's lies. She would fight for her child, for her future, and for her dignity, and whatever came next, she would face it with courage, knowing that she had the strength to rebuild. She was ready to move forward, to let go of the past, and to create a life that was truly her own. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Emily's life began to take a new shape. The divorce was finalized swiftly, and she was granted full custody of her child. The financial mismanagement Thomas had been involved in, as well as the affair and its implications, were exposed, and he found himself facing legal consequences far beyond the betrayal of their marriage. The once mighty Thomas Griffin, who had seemed untouchable, was now dealing with the crumbling of everything he had built, his reputation, his empire, and his future. But for Emily, this was not the end, it was a beginning. She became the strong, resilient woman she had always been inside but had never fully realized. The birth of her child marked the start of a new chapter. One filled with purpose, strength, and love, no longer defined by the lies or the pain of her past. She now focused on what mattered most, her son's health, their future, and the new life she was creating. Emily's journey was one of heartbreak and betrayal, but it also taught her the true meaning of strength, self-respect, and courage. Through it all, she remained determined to not just survive but to thrive. She found herself surrounded by the support of her father, friends, and the community she had worked so hard to build. And so, Emily moved forward with her son, a warrior in her own right, standing tall in the face of all that had tried to break her. The lessons she had learned were profound, and now, she could finally look ahead to the life she had always deserved. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more life stories. Thank you for watching.